All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics, and boy, it is a busy night tonight. We have several systems to talk about in the Atlantic, and the National Hurricane Center is not only monitoring these storms, but also has several storms in the Pacific to worry about too. Count about 10 to 11 in total between the different organized storms and then the areas of interest. So it is Tuesday, September 17th, and this is your tropical update here again. So we're looking at three active storms in the Atlantic this evening. We have Tropical Depression Imelda, which quickly formed up near the Texas coastline today. We have Hurricane Humberto, which as of 8 p.m. is a major hurricane, our second of the year. And we also have Tropical Depression 10, soon to become Tropical Storm Jerry, if this thunderstorm activity does persist a little bit longer. So we have a couple different things to get to. We're going to hit them left to right. So we're going to start with our friend near the Texas coastline. And this is a really interesting storm. So the story on Imelda was actually really cool, really interesting at least. The storm formed really fast. So we're gonna take you back to about 5 a.m. this morning. This is about 8 9 Z. So this is a couple hours in the morning. It was just a big ball of thunderstorms by the coastline. It was an upper level low that had drifted for days, and it just kind of made itself in this nice little ball of compact thunderstorms near the Texas coast. And the Hurricane Center had about a 20-30% chance of development. So nothing much going on here. But then this morning it began to blow up. This was taken at about 11:05, where they had just called it. They still had it about a 50% chance of development at the 11 a.m. advisory, and then just a few ticks later, they said, okay, maybe this actually is something to it. They upgraded it to Tropical Depression 11 because Tropical Depression 10 had been named at 11 a.m., the one out there in the Atlantic. And then not long after that, several wind gusts, so winds were reported to be at about 40 miles an hour along some parts of the Texas coastline, which prompted them at 12:45 Central Time to upgrade this to Tropical Storm Imelda, and it made landfall about 20 minutes later, right along the Texas coast. And this evening, it has just kind of moved on shore. And look how fast this thing spins up as I loop the whole satellite from start to finish here. Remember, this is going from like 8 o'clock in the morning until about 8 p.m. This is about a 12-hour loop. So in 12 hours, this thing went from a ball of thunderstorms, and it really got itself together. I mean, that's actually a nice little looking tropical depression, tropical storm. So we've seen this before in 2001 with Hurricane or Tropical Storm Allison, and then 2007 Tropical Storm Humberto. Previous Humberto, not our Hermosa right now. So we've seen this before. But the big threat with this, regardless of the name, is going to be the rainfall. Yeah, it was a slight ball drop as far as the tropical storm status, but only a few gusts at the beaches were above 40 miles an hour. I mean, the storm essentially only made tropical storm force winds for about an hour or two, but the heavy rainfall still to come is going to be the big story. As you have this deep Gulf flow that's going to be moving on shore. Some of the rain bands will reach as far as Louisiana, but mostly this rain is going to focus right around the Houston, Texas area, and that's going to be a problem where we're going to see, as the storm moves very slow over the next few days, many folks getting upwards of 8 to 10 inches of rain. And you see there's parts here that have that 10 to 14, 15-inch mark. So some isolated areas are going to get upwards of 15 inches of rain, which is more than a foot. And that's no joke. I mean, this area is not stranger to flooding rains and heavy rain, but this is definitely going to be a whole lot of rain in a short period of time, as the Imelda does crawl over the next about 24 to 48 hours, maybe even more than that, as it's just going to work really slow out of the area, and the rain will linger for several days from now as that southwest or that deep Gulf flow from the south is continues to pile rain up on shore. It's going to be a pretty serious flooding event for the Houston area. So hopefully people are taking it seriously there and not going through flooded waters, because water always kills more. And these tropical storms are real bad about doing this because they're not named. People don't take them very seriously. They gaff them off and go to work and do all the things they normally do, and then they try to drive through floodwaters, and it's hard to be able to respect how fast water can pile up. So if you're in this area, please be careful traveling around. Try not to be anywhere you don't need to be, because it's going to be a very wet few days in store for you guys. Again, those rainfall totals approaching or exceeding a foot in some cases. Let's move on to Hurricane Humberto. Now, a major hurricane as of 8 p.m. today. We see the eye in the storm cleared out over the last few hours. The clouds sort of left it, and we see that the western eye wall has some more convection shoot around it. So those two things are indicating the storm is strengthening, and the wind shear that is acting on the storm is not very significant. It's supposed to be about 30 knots of wind shear from the south, but it's moving in tandem with the storm's motion. So whenever wind shear is moving with the storm, it's not as impactful. It's kind of like a tailwind tailwind for an airplane versus a headwind, and it's not really seems to be bothering Humberto very much. And it is moving very close to the tiny island of Bermuda. I've got to turn off the data just so I can show you where Bermuda is. So we're going to circle Bermuda, which is this little island right there, and we'll turn the hurricane back on, and we can see that Humberto will take this general path. And given the large wind field of the storm, tropical storm force winds go out well over 100 miles, and the hurricane force winds are already making it about 50 miles away from the eye, meaning that hurricane conditions are going to pass dangerously close, if not over Bermuda. So tonight there are hurricane warnings in effect for the island as well as tropical storm warnings, and Humberto is going to move past over the next few days and then begin to weaken as it gets absorbed up in the jet stream. But it is moving away from shore, and the only other issues or things that the East Coast will have to feel is the backside flow around Humberto will bring what we call a backdoor cold front to the area, and will push a little bit cooler air into the southeast. Not exactly chilly fall-like air, but it'll be a little cooler than the upper 80s to low 90s we've had in that area. So little bit of good news there as Humberto does depart, but Bermuda will have to brace for some bad weather over the next about 48 hours as it passes. Looking elsewhere this evening, we do have the latest on Tropical Depression 10. This is a tropical depression that's formed east of the Windward Islands, and the storm is expected to intensify into Tropical Storm Jerry tonight or tomorrow morning and continue generally on this northwest path here as it moves towards and north of Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, and then will move up near the Bahamas by late this weekend. Now, a lot of the common thought is the storm is going to intensify into a hurricane by that time frame, and around about this time, it will be rounding the edge of a ridge of high pressure, and hopefully we'll see the same weakness in the ridge that Humberto has right now. As Humberto leaves, and it leaves kind of this opening in the high pressure, we're hoping that Jerry eventually will take that turn to the north and miss out on any direct impact. So you can see here, looking at the satellite imagery this evening, there is a pocket of dry air around the storm. You can see that there's all this darker images, including uh, indicating dry air, and we do have Tropical Depression 10, soon to be Jerry, moving along through it. So this will hamper the storm for the next 2 days a little bit, but generally wind shear will be light. And essentially, Jerry will be coaxed a little bit northwest. There's an upper level low that's kind of traversing the area, so that'll keep the ridge weak up this way. So it'll allow Jerry to gain a little bit of latitude instead of shunting it straight into the Caribbean. Instead, we'll have this weakness up here from this low, and it will be allowed to sort of ride this water vapor highway essentially up through this area. So we think it's going to avoid most of the islands in the Caribbean, but it will get up that direction. It will approach the Bahamas late this weekend, and we'll have to be monitoring the storm very carefully. The thing is, all computer models are indicating a turn mostly at this point. There's one or two that aren't, but for the most part, most of the reliable computer models are indicating that this turn will occur. This is also shown with some like the GEFS tracks and whatnot. Both the European and the GFS have indicated for several days the storm will form about here, move this way, and then turn out to sea behind Humberto. But it doesn't take a lot here, guys, for the this upper low to dissipate and then high pressure from the north to kind of banana like ridge in over it, and then it would be blocked from turning north and would be moving this direction. Also, we'll have to watch carefully for the exact intensity of Jerry. If it is a strong, if it's a hurricane by this point, it is more likely to try to hook around that mid-level ridge and escape out to sea. If it's actually weaker than anticipated due to the wind shear and due to the dry air that we saw out ahead of it, it may be a little more apt to drift and maybe be a bit further south. So the East Coast is not off the hook yet with the storm by any means. And even though our models do indicate this will turn, it is not by any means guaranteed at this point. So it's very important to stay very aware of the storm, and we'll have plenty more time to watch it. Again, it won't be near the Caribbean islands until the weekend, so we do have several more days to watch this. It would only be like a mid next week impact to the East Coast if it were. It's very likely to turn, but that is not guaranteed at this point in time. And just also, since you're aware of the Eastern Pacific is got more activity than we even have. They have three active tropical storms this hour. Mario and Lorena both formed today. Kiko has been kind of wandering around for the next few days. Both these storms are going to generally work off to the northwest. Lorena will pass very close to the Mexican coastline with some tropical storm watches up. Kiko is just going to kind of wander out this way. And then we do have this invest here that's going to move generally in this direction. And then we also have in the Central Pacific near Hawaii 3 additional areas that are being monitored. So there's like 10, 12 areas of hurricane centers watching tonight. It's pretty crazy. So a lot going on with them. Very busy and a very busy tropical Atlantic here this evening. As we are likely seeing some upper level influence in this, but it's just that time of year. We're in one of those periods where the storms get real active, and then we could go another couple weeks later on where it won't be nearly as active. But for now, we got to watch it, and it seems like anything that's out there spinning will form up, even something like this. So just bears watching over the next couple days, guys. So that's what I got for you here this evening. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.